Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The New Left. We're doing this an hour earlier than usual, just due to schedules and time restraints, but this is going to be a really fun episode. It'll be interesting, a lot of interesting topics to talk about, but first of all, wanted to introduce. So, of course, we got Felice here. How you doing, Felice?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Awesome. And then we've got Amira, who used to be with People's Voice Network and is now a guest with Endemic Times. Amira, how about just reintroduce yourself? Say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me on today. My name's Amira Napier, and I have a blog and YouTube channel called Endemic Times that I started pretty much right near the beginning of the pandemic. I cover a lot of different issues, cultural, social, and political issues. I also have some investigatory pieces. And actually coming out tonight, I have a in-depth video with Michael Lazar, a friend of mine, where we do a legal analysis of the Dobbs case. That was the case that overruled Roe v. Wade and Casey v. Planned Parenthood, because we kind of wanted to really look at the concurring opinions of Justice Thomas in particular, who had some kind of ominous things going on in his opinion that really haven't been, at least from what we've seen, not really disseminated in the mainstream media. So we wanted to just kind of dive into that case and also talk about some other cases that have happened in the last couple of weeks related to abortion rights. So that comes out tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Awesome. That's great.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, it's going to be on the YouTube channel. I haven't written anything out yet, just because that would probably be like half a book. There's so much there.
I'm excited to listen.
Thank you.
I will definitely keep an eye out for your book, though.
Down the road.
Yes, you're going to have to do that. You're a great writer.
Don't forget about us when it comes out, Mira.
Oh, no, not at all. I love your guys' work. I've been retweeting the heck out of it, and I really enjoyed the interview you had with Matthew Ho. I think it was.
Oh.
I was really interested with that one. I was just like, damn, you guys are doing the good work.
Glad Matthew Ho made his way back on the ballot. Fortunately, that's like 90% of the battle with third parties is just getting on the ballot.
Yeah. I liked his little call out on the Forward Party too.
Yeah. Right. Gotta talk about the elephant in the room of the Forward Party and how, All right, so today we have we're going to be talking about a few different topics. The first one we're going to be talking about is this: what just happened with Biden's student loan debt cancellation. Right, we have a lot of people on Twitter, particularly some people who are part of the squad, being like, "Oh, look at this! Joe Biden took care of the student debt crisis. Oh, it's all over. It's all done." So we're going to really be diving into this, talking about specifically what he did. And then I think it's good to just talk about what's going on in terms of who has the debt, what are some of the underlying issues regarding student debt, because I think this is just something that's really important to talk about. And no, I think people don't really do a good job talking about it typically, right, in general. So we got that, and then we're going to be talking about the Columbus teacher strike. It's the biggest school district in Ohio. And they voted to go on strike by 94%. We're going to be talking about that and why. And then we're going to be talking about inflation and how that affects the nitty-gritty things. This was something Amira brought to light. So looking forward to talking about that and talking a little bit more about, what led Amira to being like, oh yeah, this is definitely something that speaks and everything, right? So, So going forward, talking about the student debt. So I think, first of all, I think it's good that we objectively just clarify exactly what Biden did, right? Mm-hmm. So that from there, once we have the objective information, then we can build off of what type of policy this is. And whether or not this is policy that actually gets to the crux of the issue, or if it's just sort of a temporary thing, like we're going to throw you some things at you, to prevent any riots or to try and do good for the midterms, right? By my unbiased statement right there, I'm sure you know what direction we're going to go in with that. But first, let's just hold everything off to the side. And I just want to show real quick kind of what we have going on here. So this is from ABC, student loan forgiveness. I'm just going to put this up right here real quick. How much in student loan can be forgiven? The president tweeted an outline of the changes on Wednesday, which include forgiving up to $20,000 in student loan debt for Americans who attended colleges and universities on federal Pell Grants. I'll explain that a little more in a second. And up to $10,000 for Americans who did not attend schools on Pell Grants. This would only apply to borrowers who earned $125,000 or less per year. Under this new Biden administration plan, individual borrowers who took out a federal student loan and make $125,000 or less per year qualify for loan forgiveness. Those who are married or in a household making a combined $250,000 a year, and current student borrowers whose parents fall under the income caps are also eligible for loan forgiveness, according to the White House fact sheet published Wednesday. The Department of Education also specified that borrowers who recently paid off or made payments to their federal student loans during the repayment pause may also be able to request a refund of loan repayments made since March 13th, 2022. Parents who also took out Parent Plus loans or direct loans with the federal government also qualify for loan forgiveness, according to White House officials. All right, so just a couple of clarifying things, right? Pell Grants essentially is financial aid provided by the federal government given to students who expected family contribution falls underneath a certain threshold, right? So essentially, every year you fill out the FAFSA, right? Putting down all your financial information. They then dictate how much you have the ability to pay. And depending on how much federal Pell Grants or not they give you is dependent on how much you need to pay, right? So that's what Pell Grants are. Parent Plus loan is actually when typically this is something you don't want to do unless you've maxed out on other loans. But a Parent Plus loan is basically if a parent just agrees to take out a loan and they're basically co-signing you, right? But the thing is that if your inability to pay that back also would affect the parent, I believe, right? So it's sort of like the parent's going to take out the loan, but it's like, you better pay back this loan or else the whole family is going down, right? Great system there. So those are kind of the general things of what has happened, what Biden has done. So I want to just bring it back to Felice and Amira. When you first saw this, which was officially announced yesterday, right? What was your kind of first reaction with regards to this? Did you think this was going to happen, right? And what do you think kind of led to the Biden administration making this decision in the first place? Maybe we could go with Amira first and then Felice if you want to round it off.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this definitely seemed like this was part of a political plan for the Biden administration, because I think that they're seeing kind of the future of the Democratic Party in these midterm elections coming up this November. And I think that this was kind of one of those moments that they were like, okay, maybe we can do a little bit to kind of quell the unrest that they definitely see within their own party. When it comes to, the actual amounts, a lot of people have talked about the fact that this still doesn't meet a campaign promise that Biden said that he was going to get rid of all student debt for anyone making less than $125,000. So this really is kind of a drop in the bucket when you look at it. One of the things, though, that I think is important, at least for myself, that I'm really trying to keep in mind is that while this might look small to some, it looks really large to others. And for a lot of people, this is going to have a really serious benefit for them. It's going to drastically affect a change in their lives. And I think that that is a good thing. But I think that there's a lot of factors that we do have to consider when we have this discussion, because it's, someone making less than $125,000 that comes from still a little bit more of like an affluent family, versus someone that's maybe this is the first person in the home to graduate from college, so they have been able to get themselves up into this higher wage earning. They're going to be the person that the rest of their family likely comes to, and so there's a lot of that, like, yes, this is good, this is going to help a lot of people. Is it going to infuse aspects of the economy that are going to help certain people versus others? I think that that's a huge possibility. I think it's going to benefit some people that have already had the ability to buy homes and to, rent out things and stuff like that. So it does a little bit. It's better than nothing, but we kind of have to stop being okay with better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Felice.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually was kind of shocked at the Pell Grant portion, the fact that they went above the 10,000 and went to the 20,000 there. And that made a big deal for me personally because I got Pell Grants. So actually, my student loans are gone now. The issue, piggybacking off what you said, is that this isn't enough because I was watching the press briefing this morning with the White House, and they were saying, oh, it's all going to be okay for all the companies that this might affect because in 5-6 years, it's going to be right back where it was. Because people like me, I only have an associate's degree. I'm going back to school for more education, and a lot of people are only a portion into their education. People will go into education later, and they're all going to just have these same exact issues.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and I completely agree with that. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me is that this is students that are about to go into college, right, or in college now. Are they going to benefit from that? Doesn't look like it, right? It looks like it's literally whatever the people who currently have debt have now. We're going to take that away to give temporary relief, just like when they kept delaying when you had to pay back your loans, right? That was temporary relief. But are we actually addressing the whole issue of college, particularly public college, right, being more and more expensive by the year? And we're going to be showing charts to that confirm just how much public college tuition has gone up over the last decade, which is absurd. You'll be pretty surprised by that. The extreme decrease in how much states fund public colleges to begin with, right? Which is causing the tuition to go up, which is then causing college debt to go up. And then add that into, as Amira, you gave a chart too, which we'll try and get to later, how wages are not increasing at all, right? In fact, it's flatlining and decreasing in some instances throughout the year, right? Mm-hmm. So we have all of these issues that are underlying why there's student debt to begin with, right? But that is not being at all addressed. It's just a temporary relief now, right? Mm-hmm. And so give it 10 years, right? If we don't actually change something within the system, we're just going to be back right where we are now. And so let me get to start. So this is an interesting chart. So this is from Finances Online. You can find this here. So there is currently 45 million Americans that have approximately 1.6 trillion in student loan debt. All right. And this is a really good breakdown in sort of where they fall, right? So for less than 5,000, 8.7 million, 5,000 to 10,000, 7.6 million, 10,000 to 20,000, 9.3 million, 20,000 to 40,000, 9.4. Then we got 4.1 for 40 to 60 million, 60 to 82.4. 80 to 100,000, 1.2, 100,000 to 200,000, 2.1, more than 200,000, 0.7, right? So as you can see, that doesn't really, yes, as Amira and I think Felice, you both mentioned, right? It does in the moment help several good amount of people, right? There's also a good amount of people who are not going to feel it too much. And then when you calculate the interest rate that is involved with all of these loans, eventually it's just going to go back to where they were before, right?
Mhm.
And so, and I think another one that is good to show is mean total borrowed by gender and race ethnicity, right? So here we have, so blue, I know it's a little blurry. So for blue, white, white women, 31,346, white men, 29,000, a little bit more. Black women, 37,558, black men, 35,665, and then Hispanic or Latinx, 27,000. It's kind of even, more or less with women and men, and then Asian, 25,000, around that, right? So, yeah, curious to hear, like, what are kind of your either of your reactions to any of that information?
Well, I think it really it does seem to track with kind of what we've seen when it comes to the wage gap between men and women. Like women are still not earning at the same amount as men in the same positions. And then also when you look at the demographics of, the Black community, the Hispanic community, these are such disenfranchised groups. It makes sense that they're having to take out the kind of loan amounts that they're having to take out. And it's also one of those things to keep in mind. I mean, one of the things that I know myself and a lot of friends had to experience as we were going to college was you're not just taking out a loan to pay for the actual school. You're also having to take out a loan if you have to be in housing to pay for the housing, because you have to pay for housing on the college campus that you're already paying to go to school for. And then some of my friends would also take out, like, even just like put massive credit card debt because they were like, oh, I need to get a new computer. My computer doesn't work anymore. I need to get basic supplies. And then there's the whole fact of, like, you need a meal plan. And then do you have enough on your meal plan? There's so many aspects of just the college experience that I think a lot of us, when we were starting out, we didn't realize how much was going to be associated to all of these, like, nitty gritty aspects of it. For myself, it was just like, I was like, oh, it's just paying for the college itself. And you don't think about all of the little tiny details that go into it. And that also, I think, isn't part of the broader conversation of, like, this is why some people have a $200,000 loan, because they're believing the farce of, I need to go to the best school that I can get into, that might be out of state, so it might up your tuition even more. And then you're having to pay for everything else. And if you had parents like mine, they didn't want you to, have a full-time job in undergrad. They want you to, like, just get your degree and be done with it. And I had a lot of friends that had that same experience where they're like, I don't want to work. I want to just be able to focus on school. So that means they have to take out a bigger and bigger loan every single year and put more on credit card debt. It's just, it's a really disastrous situation. And I wish that we had also, I think it's also why we see our generation struggling with so much credit card debt as well, because it's not just for, like, all these frivolous things. It's for all of the things that our school loans didn't cover.
Yeah.
And it's just digging everyone into a bigger and bigger hole.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how much relief we get, it's going to end up right back there. And on the charts, one of the biggest things that anyone can notice is the fact that Black Americans have to take out more and more loans,
Mm-hmm.
which means that they are putting themselves even in more debt. And they already, obviously, if they're coming, like, to get the loan, they need the money. So any opportunity for generational wealth is gone for anyone now, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like, if you look at history, I was watching Democracy Now! Earlier, and the buildup of tuition and student loan debt and everything seemed to happen more in the 60s when like the Black Panthers were going to colleges and they were actually getting education and bringing socialism into America. And it started to build up to where, oh, it's going to cost more and more. It's going to cost more and more. We're going to make sure that this can't happen anymore. So it's very like almost like an underhanded thing that they're doing when they're like, oh, here's a little bit, and they're never going to give you everything in this administration anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's very very interesting that you said that. I mean, I think one of the things, if you look back to the history of colleges in general, right from the beginning, they were never meant to educate the masses. They were, from the start, meant to educate wealthy white men who were the sons of large property owners, right? Large slave holders, right? Mostly, let's be real, in order to receive a genteel education, right? And I think from this, in many ways, it has just continued to be under that framework, college in general, right? Except the difference now is that more and more people are told you have to go to college in order to make a living for yourself. You have to go to college in order to be worth something, right? And so people are then pulled into going into college, and then without realizing when they are at a certain age, even 18, what these loans mean and how they actually will calculate later on in life. I think I was watching a brief clip on The Hills Rising, and Robbie Suave always has like awful takes at times. He laughable, right? He had that whole kind of argument where it was like, well, you agreed to take these loans out, so you should repay them. And I wish I knew the name of the guest. I forget his name, but he came right back at him and he said, well, there's a lot of things that technically you could agree to that are actually like illegal right now, right? So for example, indentured servitude, right? You could agree to that, but that's actually still illegal, whether or not you agree to that, right? And I don't think we need to really go into why indentured servitude at this point is illegal and should be illegal, right? And then goes down to like, you could agree to sell your kidney, right? But that's also illegal, right? Whereas Robbie said, I wish it were legal. And that's of course just libertarians being libertarians. But I think going to the whole larger thing, right? It really comes down to ethics in terms of, just because you agree to it does not mean it is ethical and that you're not being exploited and such. So the next thing I wanted to bring up, so this is from the Center on Budget and Policy, right? So I think one of the things that's important to, as we know from the recession that happened back in 2009, right? There were a lot of changes, particularly, I think, overall, this economy went even more capitalistic, right? Things became privatized, right? And I think one of the things that's really interesting to see is that this analyzed from 2008 to 2018 period after adjusted from inflation, how much all these states actually invested in public college education. So the only states that were spending more than in 2008 were California, Hawaii, North Dakota, and Wyoming. States cuts funding deeply after the recession hit. The average state spent $1,502 or 16% less per student in 2018 than in 2008. Per student funding in 9 states, Alabama, Arizona, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina, fell by more than 30% over this period. In 31 states, per student funding fell between the 2017 and 2018 school years. In 15 of these states, funding also fell the previous year. And then in 18 states, per student funding rose between 2017 and 18, but still, nowhere near where it was previously a decade ago, right? And so overall per student funding essentially remained flat between 2017 and 18. So here's a little chart, and I'm not including all the states because it's a huge ass chart, but this just gives a good amount in terms of like the percentage in states that are, how much in percentage wise states are funding when decreasing their funding in state schools, right? So Arizona is up top. We got Louisiana at negative 40.6%, Pennsylvania negative 37.3%, Oklahoma negative 37.3%, right? We can keep going down. Good old liberal Massachusetts is somewhere up here too. That's pretty significant. Yeah, negative 12.1%, right? So this is going to cause tuition to increase, which it has increased a lot, because when we look at this chart right here, we'll see Louisiana, for instance, tuition has increased from 2008 to 2018 by 105.4%. Arizona, 91.3%. We keep going down, right? Look at all of these, right? At least 20, close to 30% at least for a good hunk of these states. So, I mean, when someone says who went to college 30 years ago, I paid off my loans, right? I don't think either they are arguing in bad faith or they're failing to actually see what is going on here, which is the fact that tuition keeps rising because partially because states are not funding their colleges as much. And I don't think, I mean, if I'm wrong, Felice and Amira, feel free to push back, but I don't think any of this has addressed this issue right here when it comes to lack of funding and tuition rising, right? Want to hear both of your takes on that.
Well, that's been like the biggest critique, rightfully so, from the left that's talking about like this isn't doing enough to look at the systemic issues within this system. I watched a Breaking Points, unfortunately, segment this morning that was talking a little bit about this. And Crystal made a really good point about the fact that so many colleges have now turned into basically a business. It's like a little corporation. And like every other corporation in this country, the bulk of the revenue and the profit that's made in the company is not being given to the people on the actual production line. It's not the people that are being the productive members of that company. It's going up to the executive levels and farther up. And that's why we've seen, CEO pay is now like over 350% more in some companies than what their like lowest wage earners are making. And that's really the big aspect of this, is that colleges are not being regulated when it comes to how they are charging for tuition, the services that they provide, and every additional cost that's associated when you go to school. Like things like, getting your parking permit, getting your meal plan. None of those things are included in the actual cost of tuition because they find a way to subcontract out to third parties so that they can say, oh, we need to increase the costs for this. And the same thing goes for housing. And then going back to what you were talking about, people from like 30, even 20 years ago that are saying, oh, well, I've paid off my loan. That's great for you. But the thing is that if you were someone in 2006 or 2008 that had a student loan over $50,000, your wages likely continue to this day to not match your ability to actually pay that off. And that's where the biggest issue is here. And that really comes from both left, right, Republican, Democrat. It really doesn't matter what side you're on. Our federal government has made it so that wages have stayed so stagnant. The federal minimum wage is still at the $7.25, I think it is. And so many states, their minimum wage is so astronomically low compared to the actual cost of living in those states. And that coincides with the inability to pay back these loans. You went to school because we were all indoctrinated and propagated propagandized in the media of you need to go to school so that you don't become that burger flipper. And some of us may have actually had that burger flipper as a family member. That might have been our dad, our mom, our uncle, our aunt, our sister, our brother that we saw struggling. And we were like, I don't want that to be my life. So you take out this high, ridiculous loan with a ridiculous interest rate because you have the expectation based off of what you've been told by the media, by politicians, that if you go to school, if you graduate with a 4-year degree, sometimes even a 2-year degree, it's going to increase your wage earning ability. And that is by far the biggest lie that we have been sold. It's like they knew that that's what we wanted. So they made it so that CEO pay, executive pay, it's astronomical. And if you are lucky to be at that level, thank God for you. But everyone else is just clawing at the little bit that they can get because wages are not matching what we need to be paying just for basic necessities, let alone trying to pay for a student loan.
I completely agree with you. And I think that that's been shown a lot in the past 2 years with how bad things have gotten because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's being shown every day to everyone. Like almost no one I know isn't being affected right now by inflation. I don't have very many really rich people I know. So everyone is not doing great. That like everyone is being touched that has not been touched before. And I think it's getting harder and harder for our government to continue to give us these crumbs because people are getting angry now because the people up in the suburbs are getting hit by it. People who are already getting hit by it in deep poverty are getting hit even harder now. And right now, I think our number's at like 600,000 homeless people in America. So that number's only going to get higher. And there are more people who care about others. You can see that by the polls. Everyone is voting that we should be giving people more. We should have more social policies in state right now. So I think that is a good thing that people are actually noticing it, though. We're having to go through all of this hardship, but at this point, it's hopefully going to be going into a better trajectory for the future. That's my hope anyway.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also the whole craziness that, you know, people are they're making the working class people fight amongst each other, you know, like, oh, if you're working class and not college educated, be mad at the working class person that is college educated that's maybe gotten $10,000 off of their school loan and you're paying for it. Like Andrew, you and I were talking about Boccia's tweet that was just so off-put. It was just so heinous and just despicable, in my opinion, because it's making us fight amongst each other because they don't want us to, as a collective, realize us, the 99%, are getting so crazily screwed right now. And they're just trying to do everything they can to keep us divided.
And the best thing about that, too, is I later found out they actually showed the receipts where Newsweek, I believe is who Bhatia works for, literally forgave like over $700,000 in loans that she had, right? So it's just like, okay, classic hypocrisy where, you know, you get all this handed to you and then we get crumbs and you're like, no. And I think one of the things about, you know, I think that tweet, which I don't have up right now, but essentially she was trying to say that people who make 100,000 are getting their loans like, you know, 10,000 off in their loans, right? Which I find comical because it just shows how out of touch she is, right? The fact that I don't make 100,000, I do not make close to 100,000, right? And I have, you know, I did have 17,000 in loans. That's going to make it down to 7,000. So that's good, right? Which compared to a lot of people, that's not bad, right? Recognizing that. But the fact that she is just, you know, thinking, oh, it's all the people 100,000, either she's arguing in bad faith or she's so, blue check and just out of touch, that she just thinks that that's what the people who are getting relief are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that right there. But yeah, I think the thing is, and this is a way that bad faith people are going to try and pin the classes against each other, because they're going to try and make it so that the people who are struggling that went to college versus the people who are struggling and didn't go to college to hate each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I mean, imagine if there was this much scrutiny when the banks continuously get bailed out during COVID, right? And during the 2009 crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
The $6 trillion that they did at the beginning of March 2020, Congress and the Senate, they made sure that they got their little wage increases in that package deal as well. We've spent now, I think it's over or like one aid package to Ukraine has been like $7 billion. We continue to fund Israel, and yet we have no money to cancel student debt and fund schools and make sure that teachers are paid well. It's just all crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to address one common talking point that a lot of people have, which is, if you don't like how much loans you have and you're not making enough money to pay off your loans, maybe you should major in coding or tech, right? Like they always say, just major in the right thing and then it won't be an issue for you. And I wanted to show, and I'm just going to read some of this because it's going to be a little small, but Michael Lind, who wrote a book called Class War, there's a lot in there, a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with, right? Because I do think it is a little reductionist at times. But one thing that he is on the money on, or at least it's not really even him, it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics that he's citing this data from, is that, and give me a chance to read it, many of these fastest growing jobs are growing rapidly from tiny bases. So the occupations with the greatest number of job openings, people like to say, oh, the STEM is growing, right? There's plentiful jobs in the STEM. Well, he says here, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so take it up with them if you don't like this information, the only STEM job category among the top 10 is software developer applications. At number 4, paying $101,790. That's pretty good. The other categories with the most openings in the U.S. are personal care aides, combined food preparation, and serving workers, including fast food, registered nurses, home health aide, janitors, and cleaners, except maids and housekeeping cleaners, general and operations managers, laborers and freight, stock and material movers, medical assistants, and waiters and waitresses. Among these non-STEM jobs, only 2 pay relatively well. General and operations managers pay $100K, and registered nurses at $70K, right? Every single thing else that I mentioned fall significantly below that, right? So I think it's important when we say, and this goes back to when we say there's plentiful jobs out there, right? Yes, but how many of them are actually providing decent wages that can keep up with inflation and could keep up with your student loans, right? And so again, yeah, sure, go after tech, but there's not as many jobs out there for you as you think. And again, you're also saying that, oh, no one should work in these jobs that actually do a social service for people, right? So, yeah, I'll let either of you, if you want to respond to any of those things, to take it away.
Well, I mean, I worked in the food industry right after graduating from college because it was the only job that I could get while I was working on my grad school. I went to law school pretty much right after I graduated in 2008. And the reason why I went to law school was because the recession hit and it was like, okay, I guess I'll go back to school, because everyone was saying just because you have your bachelor's doesn't mean that you're going to find a good paying job. So you should get a master's, a doctorate in something. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll do law, because I was interested in journalism at the time. But then I got stuck in like a barista position. I think I was making like $8.50 or $8.75 an hour, working full time during the day and then going to school at night. And I basically just I learned later, like the first like real job you get out of college kind of says a lot about your trajectory in the job market. And it was one of those things where I was like, I wish I had known that at the time, because I just grabbed the first job that I could get, because the market was completely saturated with people just like myself. They had just graduated or they were about to graduate, and they could not find a job in the field that they had studied in. And I think that that's the really big thing. I mean, you made a good point about, like, the tech industry. Not everyone wants to go into tech. Not everyone is interested in STEM. We need teachers. We need artists. We need creators. We also need blue collar workers. That's what keeps this country going. And we've been so separated. Our society and our culture has really been pushing a consumeristic, capitalistic mentality that's making it so that it's just all about work, work, work to make money. And it's not about having a fulfilling career that has that work-life balance that so many of us are looking for. And when it comes to like the food industry, those are some of for me, like that's the job I was in for so long. It's extremely strenuous. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your soul, because people can just be so privileged and come to you just acting like they are so much better than you and talk down to you and have these unrealistic expectations, and they don't treat you like a fellow human being. They treat you like, oh, you're in the service sector, you do what I say. Like, you're my maid, you're my servant, just do what I want. And that's part of this mentality, this classist mentality that we're still seeing today as we talk about canceling student debt, because everyone wants to act like, oh, $10,000, like, you're taking that out of my hard-earned money. And it's like, where is that same anger and frustration when our government has no transparency of their budget? Like, there's no military budget that we can see. And it's like they keep us fighting amongst each other and having these quibbles over these things that in the broad spectrum don't mean anything, because our government is just beholden to their lenders, their corporations, their big pharma, all of those things. Yet they continue to look down at these service jobs that if we didn't have them, our complete society would just collapse.
I completely agree. That was awesome. Yeah. The preach that I just put up there, you were so on point with everything you just said. And the only thing I wanted to add to that was the fact that you brought up blue collar workers and the fact that we are getting rid of so many trade schools right now. The only options we really have are to go to these more expensive, either private or public schools. And both of them are going way too high for anyone to be able to afford. So, with how our society has made us all think that we have to go, there's no actual trade schools. And then stuff like STEM even being brought up is crazy to me, because throughout school and just historically, anytime STEM was brought up, it was only for guys. And I was on the Science Olympiad team, and I was on one of the building teams, and it was so cool. And then, but it was me and my one friend I got to go with me that was a girl, and everyone else was guys. And then you're made to be, felt like other the whole time by the people that do the stuff. So it's like, it's so frustrating that it's like all these stuff going towards men that they're saying are the things we should be doing, and there's no opportunity for women to do it, is very frustrating for me. That they're like, just go do this, but there's no opportunity to learn those things for women unless you specifically go out and try to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And schools aren't made anymore for you to do anything that you want to be doing. It's only you're learning to pay taxes. That's it.
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. I think another thing that's just important and I think this brings it to how this is still a policy that I believe is still in effect, even with this, what Biden did and the administration did. So this is from the National Consumer Law Center. And they essentially said when a borrower has a defaulted federal student loan, which is more than 270 days past due, the government can seize certain incomes and assets from borrowers without a court order, right? And so this also makes it so that if from there, you're always going to have to pay more, right? The amount of loans that you owe per month are going to go up to the point where a single borrower making $25,000 with 2 children who is on an income-driven plan would have a zero payment if they were in good standing, but they would have to pay $250 per month if they were in default, right? So that right there is just a perfect example of how punitive our system is, similar to credit card debt and how, you can't more, interest rates go up because if you're not able to pay, right? It perpetually is created to keep you in poverty and to keep you owing money without any kind of effort to try and, work with you and try and help you get back on your feet, right? And so I wanted to quickly just show this because I think this is an interesting cherry on top little tidbit. So this is from March. So from March, the CEO of this place called Sophie was calling on Biden administration to erase 10,000 for borrowers, right? This is kind of an interesting story because the Sophie CEO, Anthony Noto, who is the top, he said the topic of excessive student loan debt is personal and runs far deeper than him being CEO of a fintech company that refinances student loans. My younger brother, Tommy, died in 2018, and it was a very traumatic experience for us as a family. My older brother and I were going through his belongings at an apartment a couple of days after he passed away. On his desk was a letter from Mohila, which took loans. I opened up that letter, a 47-year-old man who had been incredibly successful professionally, and he owed $44,000 in student loans, and he was 47 years old, and he had done well professionally. And so, here he talks about him taking Biden to task on this, right? So he was basically lobbying for a while for 10,000 to be wiped clean and such. So I just find that interesting. I mean, because, and I'm curious to hear kind of both of your thoughts on this. It's like, okay, we have this CEO who wants it this way. So it's like, okay, did that influence his decision for 10,000 because this CEO, this wealthy CEO wanted it that way, right? And so I think that just shows how even in certain things that are kind of appear to be given to working people, right, to the people, it still is influenced because some rich person co-signed and was like, oh yeah, that's acceptable, right? I don't know. I'm curious to hear you, Amir and Felice's takes. And on top of that, I'm curious to hear, do you think this is going to help the Democrats at all in the midterms due to this forgiveness? Who would like to go first? Felice, you want to go?
Sure. You said for me to go first, and then everything went bye-bye out of my head. So that was nice.
Amir, if you want to
yeah, sure.
Amir's been going first, so my brain was not expecting you to say me.
Amira, take it away.
Well, I mean, it sucks that all of our politicians seem to only care about shit when a CEO of some big corporation has something to say about it. And then they don't look at the nonprofit organizations, the debt collective that's looking at these hard numbers that are like, this is what would make a substantial difference to the country, to these people that are struggling right now. It always goes back to a corporation. And that's pretty much what it is. And then, your question about is this going to help the Democrats' chances? I have had several friends that voted for Biden begrudgingly last year, or in 20 whatever year it was, I can't remember anymore. But they begrudgingly voted for Biden because of that all student loan debt forgiveness, because all of my friends are under that 125,000 threshold. And I have seen countless posts now on like Instagram and Facebook of my friends just being so angry. They're like, this does really nothing for me. Some of them, they're like, okay, it's taking a good chunk out. That's fine. But for a lot of them, they're like, this isn't what he said he was going to do. And I think that because, our generation and Gen Z, where we have the receipts, we screenshot tweets that people say, and we're going to keep people to task, unlike, maybe our parents' generation that like a politician said something nice and it's like, okay, I'll vote for them. I don't think that the Democrats are going to see that as much. Like, I think some states we're going to see some differences, like, Kansas recently, they didn't want to put like disallowing any kind of abortion. Like that was a really progressive thing for Kansas to do. And so I think we're going to see some of those things on more of like the state and local level. But I think like when we look at the broader scheme of things, I still think the Democrats are going to get blasted in the midterms. And then who the hell knows what the presidency is going to look like in 2024. I'm scared.
Yeah, I'm scared too. And I also don't think that it's really going to do much for them personally. I definitely don't think it's going to do anything for Biden, because there's a lot more than just the student loan debt that is going to keep him out of office. So I don't, that's my prediction, is I don't think Biden's going to be the person there. So that is going to be interesting to see who ends up in that seat. And I found it funny that, CEO guy that was just like, oh, my brother had 44,000. It's like, this 10,000 wouldn't even save your brother's debt. Like, it wouldn't even have helped him. He still would have had $30,000. And I think that it's going to be so many people, because either you didn't go to school that often, like, or that much, I mean, or you've been paying for a long time already, if it's all gone now. So, like, I know people have like hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. I was watching a TikTok the other day that was just going around the room with some some med students, and they were all like, oh, I owe $400,000. I owe $500,000. It's like $10,000 is not going to do anything. $20,000 is not going to do anything for them. And there are a lot of people that are voting, and I don't think it's going to help Democrats as much as they think it's going to. They might go up a few percentage points, but that's not going to do anything right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a couple of special elections that recently happened, and I know one in particular because the person who lost actually was my baseball coach when I was really little. He lost as a Republican. We could talk about that a whole other day. But he was supposed to win in a special election in a district kind of where I'm close by, grew up, and he lost to a Democrat. And I think part of it had to do with, what in terms of the Supreme Court decision on abortion rights, right? So I think that's going to be a serious thing that might put Democrats, give them a little bit more of a leg up than they initially had previously. And so I do wonder if this student loan debt may drive young people out just a little bit more. My concern with that, though, is that if that does happen and causes Democrats to maybe pick up some more seats or whatnot, that's going to make the Democrats then be like, okay, we did everything we needed to do for the decade. Let's go back to just being, Wall Street, the Wall Street corporation that we are, right? So that's my main concern, is that they may have artfully played it where it's like, we'll give you a little bit, now vote. Okay, we're good. We're in power. We don't have to do anything. I don't know.
Mhm.
That's
I
just
don't think the people that are around right now are going to let that happen. There's too many
Okay.
people angry. The younger people are angry. People are wanting real change to happen, and people are
Yes.
seeing through the smoke screen a lot more now. So I don't think it's going to go as
Hope so.
easily for them as they
As
think
they
it's
think.
going to.
Well, and
Yeah.
like Felice mentioned, like inflation is hitting everyone. Like,
Yes.
aside from maybe the, top 1%, they're loving it because they're the ones raking in the dough from all of us having to deal with this. But like, we're seeing with inflation that money is just not going as far as it used to.
Mhm.
I like, me personally, like every single month we're like, okay, what on our grocery list, can we get this month versus maybe we need to save some things for next month. And we're like just paying for the bare necessities, like paying the rent, paying the utilities, and getting, food and supplies basically. And that is the reality for so many people. I mean, there's been some reports about people making $125,000 and less going to Walmart now. Like they're
Yeah.
not shopping at the Whole Foods or the Sprouts like they used to. And just costs are going up really, really high. And we're going to start, I think that that's probably going to be a really big effect on Biden and the Democrats, because they're really
Mhm.
not doing a lot to address
No.
inflation. And I think, like Felice said, like, that people aren't going to forget this. They're going to feel it. And I think that we're going to continue to feel this recession that we are very much in, and this
Mhm.
ridiculous inflation. But the supply chain issue is a big one. And then also just food availability that's a little more ominous one. But like, just food availability over the next year is going to start going down because of this high inflation cost on things like fertilizer. So farmers can't afford the amount of fertilizers that they used to get last year or even the year before. So it's going to have less crop yield. So it's going to have less supply of food, which is going to drive the prices up even more. And then only the people that can afford those prices are going to be able to get that kind of food. So there's a lot of recurring issues going on that I think are going to affect the Biden administration, especially for the presidency. And I think for the midterms, I mean, it's only near the end of August. We've got some time, and I have a feeling that the Democrats are probably going to make a few more blunders on their way to
Probably.
November before long. We'll see more.
Yeah. No. Okay. Cool. I think one thing before we get to the Columbus teachers strikes, I knew we'd really get deep into the weeds of this topic because there's so much fucking here for that. One thing I found that was really interesting is that U.S. News reported that those who graduated in 2020 from a ranked private college borrowed average of $32,029 in loans. Public, 26,627. Right. So that just shows how much public colleges are really starting to not be as different as they should be from private colleges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some instances, I mean, we have to keep in mind that there are some scholarships available for private colleges that can sometimes make private colleges more affordable than public colleges in some instances, right? So what does that tell in terms of where our public college system is going, right? Public, it's supposed to be for the public. But when you start seeing those numbers and you start seeing tuition and housing going up, it's really not education at all for all in any which way. So yeah, now want to add this to this stream. So this is now we're going to be going into this Columbus strike, and this is essentially what happened. So CBS Evening News teacher strike. More than 4,000 teachers in Ohio's largest school district remain on strike for the third day, forcing students back into remote learning. The union wants smaller classes and says teachers are working in dilapidated schools. And so I'm just going to show this video now.
Tonight, as negotiations between the school board and teachers union continue, drivers in Columbus cheered on picketers striking for a third day. Ohio's largest school district is now online only after the nearly 4,500 member teachers union rejected the school board's latest offer.
Our children are our priority, and we will do what we need to do to, ensure there's a resolution that's in their best interest.
The union wants smaller classes and says teachers are working in dilapidated schools where water pipes leak, lead paint peels from walls, and air conditioning and heat are non-existent.
We will continue fighting until we have safe, properly maintained, and fully resourced schools in every neighborhood.
The walkout comes on the heels of a new report that found average weekly teachers' wages grew in the last 25 years by just $29 when adjusted for inflation.
They need to do what needs to be done to get the kids back in school.
Today, frustrated parents say virtual learning is a waste of valuable time.
How are you all impacted? Basically, it's as if there's no education system at all right now.
Tiffany Kamen had to scramble for her new kindergartner.
It was really stressful for me. I was up all late last night trying to figure out what to do.
Now, today marked the 23rd time both sides were at the bargaining table since this spring, and we're told today's session is lasting longer than expected. Meanwhile, the district says substitute teachers will continue to run remote classes until there's a deal. Nora?
Elise Preston, thank you very much.
I hated how that was done so much because they went and found the two parents who are upset because most of the parents have been supporting the teachers.
Yes.
I mean, who would want their child to go to these schools either? I mean, I wouldn't. I would never send my child to a school in this heat with no air conditioning, with the paint peeling off the walls, with everything being horrible for everyone. And then most of the parents are even saying they're not going to, break the strike line and to send their kids to virtual. So they found the two parents to interview that were upset. And yes, it's causing a little bit of, you have to either find someone to watch your kids or anything, but most of them are supporting them as they should be. It's ridiculous that they immediately went, okay, we're going to make sure this looks horrible for everyone. They're being the bad guys.
Right. And that's what corporate media knows best to do, pin one group against another. So they're trying to create a narrative where it's like parents against teachers, when in reality, a lot of parents, you can read different articles, they are supporting it because, paint peeling, no AC, being ridiculously hot, right? That's not a place to send a child. Amira.
Well, and also, like class size is a big thing too. I have two siblings. They're both school teachers, and that's their gripe as well. Their classes just get larger and larger. They're expected to do more for their students with the same amount of pay and the same, amount of resources if they even, have them. And that's a big deal. And it's like how we have these, education centers, places that are for learning for students. It's like we keep going from like one extreme to another. Some states and some communities want to turn them into basically prisons, one door in, one door out, and like security guards and all of these things. And we keep losing that fundamental aspect that this is supposed to be an educational place for our kids to go. It's to help them grow and to learn to become full-fledged human beings, to learn how to cooperate with each other, to communicate. And we can't keep just putting all of that on the teachers. It does have to be a collective of both the parents and the teachers, but as in each of these states and at the federal level too, we need to be providing these schools with the right funds and making sure that those funds are going to the actual infrastructure of the school. Like for instance, Uvalde, Texas. So I've been looking at the Robb Elementary School shooting that happened. And one of the biggest things that I was looking at was that 40% of the budget went to the police, and that the school's budget, it wasn't that they didn't have the money for things, but they weren't focusing that money on the right things. They weren't replacing door locks that were faulty, that everyone knew were faulty. Even the police officers knew that room 111 that had the issue with the lock was a faulty lock. They knew that beforehand. So it's one of those things of like, schools do sometimes get a lot of money, but it usually goes to like the board, the administrators. Just like a corporation, it goes to that executive level and higher. And I think that that's what these teachers need to just kind of keep hitting on to that point of like, we are the ones that are on this ground, that are working with these students, that are having to, you know, keep control of sometimes 33 students. I don't know how they do it. That's God's work right there. And the fact that we continue to just give them pennies just goes to show that we don't have our fundamentals right, and we need to get those back, and we need to start funding education and the arts and not have it just be about which schools have the best athletes, and so that's what we're going to fund, because that's unfortunately a really big thing too. So I mean, I applaud these teachers, and I really am glad that there's parents supporting them, but I wish, like Felice said, that they had actually had a broader array of, you know, teacher or parent input, that they understand why these teachers are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that really stood out to me was that the fact that 94% of teachers and education workers in Columbus, Ohio, voted to go on strike, and they were that's a pretty united front right
Yes.
there.
That's beautiful.
That I don't think, like Felice, you were saying, I don't think CBS really enunciated that too much. They tried to make it look like it was a two sides thing. And yeah, they were fighting for smaller class sizes, safe school buildings, and fully funded arts, music, and physical education programs, which that really particularly stood out to me, because particularly in urban schools, which this is in Columbus, which is the capital of Ohio, right? They are cutting arts and music left and right. And that studies have shown that has a huge impact on a student's ability to learn, right? And so that is just right there, I think, a perfect example of how apartheid-wise our school system really is, right? Because, of course, everyone knows, particularly urban schools, there's a disproportionately amount of Black and brown students that go to urban schools, right? Whereas suburbs are more catered towards white people, and they never, I'm starting to generalize, but typically they have a lot more resources for arts and music, right? And so I think those were one of the things that really stood out to me. And as somebody who has been in BPS schools, the Boston Public Schools, all of this is completely believable. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were some certain things that they weren't even saying that are happening, right? Because public schools are really crumbling in a lot of citywide districts.
I thought it was interesting, though, that you didn't list the fact that they don't, they're not asking for pay raises. And that was the other thing that that little segment said, that was like, oh, they've gotten a pay raise in the last few years. Like, they're not even fighting for a pay raise. That was one of the things that when I was listening to a few different interviews of the teachers, they were like, we're not asking for a pay raise. This is completely just for your children to have a good place to have an education. That's it. That they're asking for the bare minimum, and they're getting fought on it into the school year. That there's no way that the bad guy is the teachers here. And that's always how it's going to be with strikes. Like, the workers, they're going to be the bad guys, and the poor CEOs and the poor administrators, they don't know what to do with them asking for all of these bare minimum things that you should have as a teacher. I mean, all my teacher friends, they all just got done getting stuff on their big old list of the things they have to buy for their classrooms, or are begging people to please help buy for their classrooms. Like, they don't do anything for teachers. And the second they start fighting back just a tiny bit for the bare minimum, they're met with bullshit immediately. It's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and this kind of reminds me a little bit indirectly. Actually on People's Voice Network, go check out episode. I interviewed one of the Starbucks organizers in Boston, Spencer, who, they've been on strike for, I believe, 40 days now, at least, which is the longest in Starbucks history for striking workers. And Sabby actually had Spencer on her show. I believe it was either last night or the night before. And one of the things that Spencer said that really stood out to me was that it's not about Starbucks, right? It's our workplace today, but it could be your workplace tomorrow, right? And I think that right there, what's happening with Columbus, right? Teachers, I think that applies with them, right? It's not just about specifically the Columbus district. It's painting a light to the inequities within schools, within citywide district schools, and also just the oppressive working conditions that so many people at work have, right? And so I think one of the things is just, throughout all these different sectors, we're seeing people, enough is enough, right? People in Columbus, I think that was like the first time in what they said 50 years that they had gone on strike, something like that. So these are things that, people are being woken up, kind of going back to what we were saying. And so hopefully the energy continues because there's a lot of work to do. And so, yeah, our final topic is talking about inflation. I know inflation has kind of organically come up several times through, and I wonder why. What $100 is worth these days versus 3 years ago. So Amira, you brought this up to our attention here. So shout out there. Red hot inflation may finally be showing signs of cooling, but around the U.S., the cost of living is still soaring. Consumer prices last month rose 8.5% from the same time a year ago, the Labor Department reported last week. While that figure may be lower than economists expect, it represents yet another turn of the screw for household budgets. Exactly how much has our spending power been diminished by inflation this year? These days, a dollar is worth 86% of its value 3 years ago. That is absurd, according to an online inflation calculator. That means an item that cost $100 in 2019 would cost $115 today. Let's just add that up real quick, like magnify that. That's why it's getting harder and harder each month to make ends meet for everyone. In more tangible terms, that means spending $100 on brunch with a friend in 2022. The brunch crowd will get you one less mimosa, or the equivalent of about 15 less than it did in 2019. Going back even further, $100 worth of spending in the year 2000 would now cost $172. A $100 shopping spree in 1980 would set you back a whopping $359 at today's prices. The U.S. experiences inflation nearly every year and has done so since the 1950s, so it's normal that the dollar has decreased in value over time. What's not normal is the currently excessive rate of inflation, which is more than quadruple the Fed's annual target of 2%. And I definitely recommend anyone watching to watch some of Richard Wolff's stuff, because I think he does a really great job at explaining really what is causing the inflation, and really kind of squashes a lot of narratives where they're trying to say, oh, we're spending too much on people. The American Rescue Act is what caused, curious to hear any of your reactions and thoughts to this.
I love how they wanted to seem relatable, so they brought up brunch and mimosas, because that's my day-to-day or weekend.
Yeah. Your typical $100 meal, that's going to cost you a little.
Oh yeah, I'm just spending $100 on brunch and then my mimosa. Oh no. I don't understand.
I mean, I put up a tweet a couple of maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, because I was on Amazon and I was doing some food shopping because I have a food allergy, so I can't consume gluten. So that's already a really high cost. It's added so much to my cost of food since I've started in 2012, and it was for something simple, like these little pre-made like pizza crusts, because sometimes you just need some simple stuff to help you get through the day. And it went up over $11.98 from like 2 months ago when I had bought some then. And I was just like, this is insane. This is like basically a $12 markup before taxes, before everything. How are they justifying this? Because I don't have an additional $12 in my budget for something that I'm getting to try to help myself. And I'm like, of course, this is what they do. They weaponize everything. They weaponize our food. Like the things that you normally would get are now costing so much more. If you're trying to be healthy, things are really expensive. Everything is just so prohibitive. And it's like, the minute that we started to catch the game, they changed the rules so that it works for them, but not for us. And we just continue to see that. And it sucks, because I know so many people are just pinching pennies every single month. And I don't see how this is going to be sustainable in the long run. I think that's, like, like Felice was saying, like this is going to be what keeps people thinking as we get to the midterms, because if we don't see any real relief, this is going to take people to the ballot box and likely wipe the floor with the Democrats.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And like you were saying before, people are going to Walmart now instead of going to Sprouts and Whole Foods and everything. And I'm not saying anything against the people that go to those places at all. I get it. I like the cheese section over in Whole Foods. It's big. There's a lot of different cheeses I've never even heard of. But, there's a certain set that, have their standards that they're so used to, and they're used to being around, a certain aesthetic with all these nice little places and getting their little smoothies and things while they're walking around. And they're not going to like Walmart. I go there in my pajama bottoms and I don't care. And I feel like I have to get dressed to put on makeup and stuff to go to a Whole Foods. So people are going to really not like that, especially like the Karen crowd that I'm thinking of.
Oh gosh.
They are going to have problems. They are going to be culture shocked, and they are not going to know what to do with themselves, and they're going to get mad. So I don't think that this is all going to work out real well, and people are definitely going to start causing a ruckus. And when you get the Karens mad at you, that's when things are going to change. You think
that's when you know you're doing something right.
Right.
No, they cannot. So, I think it is. There's going to be some change. I'm hoping in the right direction, but I can't imagine it something not happening. And if nothing happens, then they're not going to have a government anymore. Like, it's just not going to be America anymore. Those are the two options: change something or no more America.
Which that's, I think, becoming more and more a possibility. The latter.
Yeah,
you said.
We'll be the United States of Amazon.
Oh God! Hey, we don't have to change our initials though. Right? How awesome is that? We're still the USA.
It's almost like they planned it.
It's meant to be. Oh man!
I would lose it. Oh no, like an Amazon themed flag. No, I can't deal with this.
With a stupid smile.
Oh my gosh, the little the stripes are going to be a smile now. Like, it's just going to go in that shape now of the flag. It's going to be awful. Ugh.
So so those are basically our topics for tonight. Hope you enjoyed. A lot, as usual, a lot going on. Amira, thank you again for coming on. Pleasure to have you.
We've missed you.
Yeah,
I've missed you guys too.
100%. And I know I'm definitely speaking for everybody at part of PBN when I say that. Amira, what do you, any sort of things you have coming up that you would like to plug in?
I mentioned at the top that I have a Dobbs legal analysis review coming out tonight. And then I also have a couple other videos coming out this weekend and next week. One is looking at the recent attacks that happened in Palestine, because that's always a hot topic. And then the first few shipments of grain have been out of Ukraine, finally kind of making their way down to different parts of the Middle East and Africa, because there's a really serious issue. Almost every single country in Africa and the Middle East is suffering from famine and drought-like conditions. So I've got a video coming out on that as well. And then you can find more of my work at endemictimes.com. That's my blog. I also have a Substack and then a YouTube channel, Endemic Times, under the same name. And thank you guys so much for having me on today. It was great chatting with you guys. I've missed you. And you guys continue to do the great work that you're doing, because you're doing a great job.
Appreciate it. And yeah, Felice, anything else you would like to add?
Keep an eye out on the PVN Substack, because I'm going to be publishing my first little writing thing on the history of corrections in America soon.
Nice.
So hopefully everybody enjoys that, and everyone should make sure to like and subscribe to the Populist Voice Network and Endemic Times over on their YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And be sure to catch Overlooked News. That's on during the weekends with me and Z. We are going to be talking, I think, to a guest, but Felice, are they 100% confirmed? I'm not sure if I should. I'll take caution.
Sure.
We'll advertise it. We'll advertise it when I don't want to make sure. Yeah, I want to just be safe with that.
Yeah.
But I think
it's going to be a good episode either way.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And I just want to close out by saying, because I think this quote really sticks out to me with what I've been seeing people with their cringe takes over Twitter, because people got $10,000 of some sort of relief. Malcolm X's great quote where he says, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. So I just say, for whoever is watching here, always keep that in mind. Always keep that in mind. Whatever sort of issues come into place, there's always going to be people who are trying to get working class people to fight amongst each other. Z, I think we said People's Voice Network. Did we say Populist Voice?
I don't know now, and now I'm terrified.
Yeah, People's Voice Network.
People Voice Network.
We're
I
on
hope
the
I didn't
People's Voice
say that.
Network. So yeah, People's Voice Network. People's Voice Network. All right, everyone.
We are people with voices, and we're network like us. Now.
Yes, and we're not. We have the little apostrophe S in there.
Yes, very important apostrophe.
There's some other people who are not great that have that. All right, everybody, it's been great, and catch you next time.